Hi, I'm Holly. My mom once told me I'd never measure up to my sister, right in front of everyone. But that wasn't the worst part. While they clapped for Marcia's success, I was silently paying her mortgage, her tuition, even her birthday cakes. They erased me from photos, cropped me out of their stories, and called it love. But when I finally showed them the $62,347 they took from me, why did no one say a word? Why did they act like I was the one who betrayed the family? And what do you do when your mother writes you out of the will, but keeps your bank account alive? Charleston's air had that thick, humid cling to it, half perfume, half pressure. I pulled into the driveway, barely conscious of my aching legs, the indent of my compression socks still marking my skin after 12 straight hours in the ICU. The scent of antiseptic clung to my scrubs even though I'd changed before coming. I was late. Of course I was late. Mom, Reet, was waiting just inside the front door. Her expression didn't shift when she saw me, but her voice carried the same edge it always did in public settings. Kara, we've already sat down. Not a, how are you? Not even a, thanks for coming. Just that cold, polished tone she reserved for disappointing me in front of others. I gave a tight smile, nodded, and walked past her into the dining room. The table sparkled. Crystal glasses, candles flickering inside ornate holders, silverware aligned with obsessive symmetry, Southern hospitality in its most curated form. But the moment I saw the chair at the far end, closest to the bathroom, the one that wobbled if you leaned left, I knew exactly where I stood. I took my place. Dad raised his glass as I sat. To Marcia, he beamed, for her latest feature in the Charleston Entrepreneurs Network. Applause rippled around the table. Marcia, seated like royalty next to Reet, tilted her chin and smiled. Oh, it was just a small piece, nothing major. That was her favorite kind of false humility, the kind that invited more praise. She's being modest, Reet chimed in. They called her a rising star in sustainable brand consulting. I listened. I nodded. I even smiled. Because I'd been trained to do that. Stay gracious, stay grateful, don't disrupt the scene. I had a big win this week too, I said, my voice low but steady. Pulled a man out of cardiac arrest in 4 minutes. The attending said it was textbook perfect. There was a brief pause. That's nice, honey, Reet replied, without even looking in my direction. Marcia, tell them about that pitch you made to the eco-fashion group. That's when it happened. The shift, the invisible snap inside me. I looked around the table, eyes avoided mine. Even my uncle, who'd once said I was the only one with any real grit, kept chewing without comment. Marcia didn't skip a beat. She just launched into her next story. I sat there listening, nodding, and quietly measuring how long I'd been playing the fool. When the waiter brought out the entrees, the difference was unmistakable. Marcia's plate held lobster tail, buttered asparagus, saffron rice. Mine, pasta primavera. I checked the menu card. Hers was handwritten, mine printed. You get the kid's plate? One of my cousins joked from across the table, chuckling as if we were all in on it together. I laughed along, careful not to let the sting show. Must be on a budget tonight, I replied. But the knot in my stomach tightened. Reet had gone to culinary school. Food was her love language, unless it was meant for me. I watched her pass another glass of wine to Marcia, brushing her arm gently as she did. Marcia's ring caught the candlelight. A new one. Probably a gift. I didn't get gifts. I got reminders. You've always been the strong one. You don't need much, do you? Kara, we count on you. I remembered my last birthday. Marcia got a weekend trip to Asheville. I got lavender hand lotion and a reusable grocery tote. I remembered being 13 and getting a used laptop to help with school. Marcia, 10 at the time, got an iPad because she's creative. And I kept quiet, because that's what I did. You'll never be like your sister, Kara. The words cut through the room like a blade. Reed had said it out loud, calmly, firmly, as if stating the weather. There was no context, no preamble. Just the raw truth she'd always let hang in the air, spoken now for all to hear. I didn't flinch. I didn't reply. But something behind my eyes burned. I swallowed the lump in my throat and sipped my water, my hand as steady as ever. No one said anything. Not Dad, not Marcia, not the cousins or aunts or Reed's bridge club friend 2 seats down. Marcia lifted her glass in a quiet, private toast and smiled at me, like she'd won something or had just been officially crowned. I looked at my plate, at the pasta now cooling into a congealed mess, and pushed it away. They weren't ignoring me. They were erasing me. I sat through dessert. I even complimented the lemon tart. Then I excused myself to the restroom, not because I needed to, but because I needed air. The hallway smelled like roses and floor polish. I stared at my reflection, took a breath, and walked back out. No one noticed I'd been gone. As the table buzzed again with laughter, I counted every moment I had funded this performance, every mortgage payment, every credit card payoff, every emergency fund I dipped into, every time Marcia just needed a little help getting over this hump. They toasted her success with wine I bought, 8 gourmet meals paid for from an account with my name on it. They celebrated her career built on a foundation of someone else's sacrifice. Mine. And as I sat there, the wobbly chair shifting with every movement, I knew something with more certainty than anything I'd felt in years. This wasn't the first dinner like this, but it was going to be the last. I folded my napkin, laid it neatly by my plate, and looked up. Reed caught my eye. For a split second, her gaze flickered. Not guilt, not shame, just surprise that I was still sitting there. Marcia sipped her wine again, eyebrows raised, like she expected me to refill her glass. But I didn't move. I just stared. And thought, I've paid for this house. I've paid for her life. And now, I'm done pretending I didn't. I hadn't even stood from that wobbly chair yet when my phone vibrated against my thigh. The hum was subtle, buried under the clinking of silverware, and Marcia's honeyed voice wrapping up yet another story about her vision board coming true. I hesitated, then slipped my phone into my lap and glanced down. A bank notification stared back at me. $4,500 withdrawal. Lux Guilt, Union Square. It took a second. My brain, still soaked in the aftertaste of humiliation, didn't quite register. Lux Guilt. I'd never been there. High-end boutique in New York, if I remembered right, one Marcia had raved about during some dinner months ago. Their cashmere feels like it's spun with intentions, she'd said, waving off the price tag like it was a rounding error. I knew exactly what card it had come from. The joint one. The one I let her use once, 2 years ago, just to float a security deposit when she moved out after a breakup. I'd never canceled it. Because I trusted. Because I thought I had to. And now, she was dressed in a silk jumpsuit I didn't recognize, with jewelry that shimmered under the chandelier like a sponsored post come to life. I locked my phone and smiled. A chill settled in my chest, quiet but complete. Was that jumpsuit hers? Or mine? Had I financed her entire evening look without knowing? The table roared with laughter, something about Marcia being scouted by a Women in Branding panel for a podcast series. Mom leaned forward, eyes glistening. We're so proud. She's worked so hard. Worked so hard. I looked back down at the message, reread it again, and tucked the phone into my clutch without a word. I felt the heat rising up my throat, but I swallowed it. Not the way I used to keep the peace. This was different. This wasn't heat from shame. It was fuel. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the blinds like it was too polite to wake me all at once. I hadn't slept well, but I was already sitting up in bed, phone in hand, scrolling. Not emails, not hospital charts, just Instagram. And there it was. Marcia, Reet, aunts, two cousins. A beach behind them, waves curling like set design. Cocktail glasses, sunglasses, filtered gold light and bronzed skin. Caption: Palm Springs magic with the people who matter most. People who matter most. I blinked, stared harder, as if my absence might be corrected if I looked again. I wasn't tagged, not even in the group shot. I wasn't standing off camera, or holding the phone, or fetching drinks. I simply wasn't. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't drop. There was nothing dramatic in my reaction, just stillness. A kind of cold, resolute clarity. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. I remembered that weekend. Double shifts at the hospital. An emergency cardiac rotation that had run 3 hours overtime. My legs were so swollen when I got home that I'd slept on the couch with them elevated. I'd answered a text from Mom that night, just a "hope you're well," with a photo of my feet wrapped in ice packs. No reply. I clicked back to the post, scrolled the comments. Gorgeous ladies. Powerful bloodline. Goals. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a celebration, a declaration, a photo op that didn't include the person who'd been quietly paying the mortgage on the house Mom and Marcia still lived in. I stared at my own face in the dark phone screen. No expression, no tears. Just that slow shift again, the same one from last night. I opened the Notes app, titled a new one, Unexplained Expenses. Underneath, I wrote just one line, $4,500, Lux guilt, used without consent. Then I added another, Palm Springs trip, uninvited, undisclosed, unfunded. That night, I sat cross-legged on my couch in sweats, bank statements open on my laptop, a yellow legal pad beside me. I wasn't looking for drama. I wasn't planning revenge. I just needed facts. How many times had this happened? I'd transferred $1,500 here, $600 there. Picked up the tab because it was easier. Let things slide because she's going through a lot. Forgotten to follow up because I was too tired, too overworked, too hopeful that someday they'd just remember on their own. They never did. The line echoed in my head, one I'd heard in a podcast months ago, back when I still thought my family dysfunction was just complex. If they wanted you there, you'd be there. Not a maybe, not a misunderstanding, a choice. And suddenly, I could trace a whole constellation of these choices. Thanksgiving dinners I found out about from photos. Group chats where I was only included when someone needed a ride to the airport. Reed's Christmas letter last year where Marcia was described as the light of our lives, and I was off saving lives somewhere in Scrubs. I opened my calendar, started penciling in dates next to charges on my credit card. How many favors had turned into expenses? How many I'll pay you back moments never returned? I lost count around 40. 40. It hit me, not with a bang, but with a steadiness that made me feel taller, stronger, more awake than I'd been in years. This wasn't accidental. This was systemic. The quiet one, the dependable one, the one who wouldn't question because she knows how to take care of herself. That had become my role. And roles like that? They don't get invites. They get invoices. I sat back, looked around my small apartment, unrenovated, modest, functional, no coastal charm, no designer throw pillows, no curated social moments, just a room paid for by real work, long hours, and the belief that goodness would come back around. Now I knew better. I reached for my phone, screenshot the bank charge, then the Palm Springs photo. Then I saved them both into a new folder on my drive labeled Receipts. This wasn't a meltdown. This was an awakening. And finally, for the first time in years, I spoke the words out loud. Not to anyone else, just to the walls that had held me up during the silence. You're going to remember who paid for your life. The day after that photo, the one in Palm Springs, I came home from my shift, kicked off my shoes, and dropped onto the floor of my apartment. I wasn't tired from patience. I wasn't emotionally drained from death or codes or even overtime. No, I was drained from my own silence. My apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge. I pulled open the small filing cabinet I kept next to my bookshelf. Tax returns, W-2s, car title, the usual boring grown-up paperwork. I meant to look for last year's 1099 to prep for an upcoming hospital audit, but my hand grazed an older folder tucked near the back. It was labeled Marcia, FAFSA. The label alone made my stomach tighten. I sat on the floor, unfolded the flap, and pulled out a stack of papers I hadn't seen in years. Loan documents, financial aid forms, a printed copy of her tuition payment plan. I scanned the lines, following the typed information like a fuse waiting to burn out. Then I saw it, bottom right corner of page 3. Payer, Kara E. Monroe. There was a signature, my name, scribbled, but not mine, not even close. The rush of betrayal that followed didn't come with fire. It came cold, sharp, focused. I remembered that call. She said, "Can you just look over this FAFSA stuff with me? I'm getting confused about dependent status or something." I had nodded through the phone while folding laundry. She'd dropped off a stack of papers I never reviewed, just promised I'd help if needed. I thought I'd been kind. She thought she'd found a loophole. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was forged. That night, I logged into my bank portal. It took a second. Two-factor authentication, text verification, the usual. I filtered transactions by amount, then by vendor. My screen lit up with numbers. $873.42. Elite Car Rentals, $1,112,000. The Ivy Salon, $359.99. Rejuvia Skin Spa, $4,500. $100. Lux Guilt. I kept scrolling, kept clicking, kept breathing. Each charge carried a date, many of them overlapping with nights I was on 12-hour shifts, charting vitals, resuscitating strangers, washing blood from scrubs. And while I was documenting post-op recovery, someone else was using my name to live glamorously. It didn't feel like they'd taken my money. It felt like they'd rewritten my life. I checked the credit limit on the joint card. It had been raised, twice, without a single notification. Of course not. The contact email had been updated. To Marcia's. The realization settled slowly. I had become her silent investor. Flashback hit me like a wave I never saw coming. Last summer, she posted a long-winded Instagram story about finally being debt-free and clawing her way out with grit and gratitude. I remembered watching it, thinking, well, good for her. Now I knew what that freedom was built on, me. I closed the laptop, sat still for a moment, then stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. Instead, I powered on my printer. I printed the loan documents first, then the bank statements. One by one, I printed receipts, highlighting every transaction that didn't belong to me. My tiny desk was soon covered in a snowfall of betrayal. No tears, no rage, just an evolving clarity. I was paying for her freedom while losing mine. That sentence sat heavy in my chest. I said it aloud just to hear it echo. Every favor I had done in silence had turned into a permanent burden she never planned to repay. She didn't need help. She needed funding, and she'd found her source. And I, stupid, steady, good old Kara, was dependable enough to let it happen without question. Not anymore. I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. Title: Marsha's Lifestyle Fund category headers filled the top. Mortgage contributions, student loans, credit card charges, vacation expenses, salon beauty, miscellaneous, emergencies. Line by line, I filled in the numbers. By the time I reached $39,000, I paused. I hadn't even added utilities yet, or the down payment on that used Prius she claimed was a gift from Mom. My fingers hovered over the keys, no longer unsure, no longer searching. I was documenting, like I did at work, symptoms, timestamps, diagnosis, but this time the patient was my life, my bank account, my boundaries. I snapped photos of each document, storing them in an encrypted folder. My cloud drive updated quietly in the background. I renamed the folder, Proof, No Longer the Bank. This wasn't revenge, it was protection. A voice in my head, stronger now, whispered, "You don't need them to confess, you just need them to stop." I stood up, stretched my back, and glanced around the apartment again. Everything here was mine. Modest, yes, but earned. I picked up the loan document again. The forged signature was shaky, hurried, like someone panicked I might notice. My name, written by someone who believed I wouldn't. She wasn't wrong. I didn't notice. Until now. I held the page closer, studying the pen pressure, the curl in the K, the uneven baseline. "That's not just financial abuse," I whispered. "That's identity theft." The words left my mouth with a steadiness that surprised me. I reached for my phone, scrolled through contacts, found the one labeled Attorney Pro Bono. My thumb hovered above the call button. Not because I was hesitating, but because, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. A week passed, but the heaviness hadn't lifted. I went to work, changed bedpans, adjusted ventilators, nodded politely at coworkers, and carried on like nothing had shifted. But inside, something had cracked, something permanent. Then came the call from Reet. "It's Marsha's recognition dinner this Friday. Business Women's League is honoring her. We're all going. Of course you'll come, right?" I let the pause linger. "Your sister deserves the support. Family shows up." That line. Always that line. Reet didn't ask if I wanted to go, didn't wonder if I had a shift or how I was doing after the last time we sat across a table together. It was an order, disguised as invitation. So I went. The venue was downtown, polished wood floors, marble columns, flower arrangements that reeked of excess. I showed up in a navy blazer I'd worn to funerals and staff meetings. My name wasn't on the place card list. A young woman at the entrance whispered to someone, then led me to a back corner table near the kitchen doors, partially blocked by a decorative pillar. I could hear the clatter of plates more than the microphone on stage. From the shadows, I watched. People flowed toward Marsha like she radiated light. Her dress shimmered, her hair curled in deliberate, media-ready waves. Every handshake, every photo, every smile, it was all choreographed, and everyone played along. I didn't expect to be included, but I didn't expect to feel so staged out. The lights dimmed for the presentation. A projector screen lit up. Marsha's Journey, the title read, in a font I recognized from a branding deck I'd helped her edit 3 years ago. Image after image flicked past. Marsha at networking brunches in vineyards beside executives. Marsha at a nonprofit gala. Marsha at a yoga retreat in Sedona. Marsha standing in front of a remodeled beach house, one I'd partially paid the security deposit for. Not once did I see myself, not in the background, not in the captions, not in the carefully arranged narrative of resilience and hard work. There was a picture from a trip I'd organized and funded, Marsha and Reet in front of a mountain cabin, wine glasses raised. I remembered taking the photo. I wasn't even mentioned. This wasn't just exclusion, it was intentional erasure. The applause at the end of the slideshow rang out like bells at a funeral. I sat still, clapped once, looked down at my hands. They had used me, and now they'd cropped me out. The MC invited Marcia to the stage. She took the mic like it was built for her. I'm honored. I really am. This has been such a journey. I didn't get here alone. Her voice cracked. I had amazing mentors. I had a team that saw something in me. I had my amazing boyfriend, who never lets me forget my worth. And of course my mom, who believed in me before anyone else did. People awed. Someone stood to clap. She didn't look in my direction, didn't say my name, which was fitting, because I wasn't part of this production. No mention that I connected her with the friend who got her that internship that turned into a job. No acknowledgement that I'd quietly footed her bills so she could focus on building herself. A woman at my table leaned toward me. Are you the assistant or a distant cousin? I smiled, tight and small. Just someone who sees more than most. She blinked and turned away, clearly unsure what to do with that answer. The clapping slowed. The lights came up. People swarmed Marcia with compliments. Reet stood nearby, basking like a proud campaign manager. I slipped out. In the parking garage, under flickering fluorescence, I sat in my car and opened my phone. New note. Title: Last Public Humiliation. Below it, I typed, Marcia Award Dinner. Slideshow, no photos of me. Speech, zero mention, despite career launch tie. Public misrepresentation of support structure. And then the sentence that I didn't know I needed until it appeared on the screen. Next time they try this, I'll bring the proof. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. Tired, clear-eyed. A woman who'd spent too long letting other people write her out of her own life. I didn't need to scream anymore. I didn't need to storm stages or flip tables. I needed to prepare, to stop reacting, to start proving. Sometimes the most powerful sound is silence before the storm. That night, at my apartment, I dug into the drawer I used to avoid. I pulled out a file folder, slid in copies of the financial docs I'd printed earlier that week, labeled everything carefully. Dates, amounts, reference numbers. I wrote family fraud in permanent marker across the front. Then added a sticky note beneath it. Exhibit A. I pressed it closed and sealed the flap. Then I whispered, let's see if they clap for you when the truth shows up. The scent of lemon chicken and rosemary filled the hallway as I stepped into my parents' house. Reet stood near the entryway, her arms open just wide enough to call it welcoming. But her eyes, they didn't smile. There she is, she said, voice sugary enough to mask the usual frost. We started without you, just plating up. I hung my jacket slowly, absorbing the familiar rhythm of Reet's choreography. Warmth laced with cold steel. The dining room looked just like it always did when something needed covering up. Candles, polished silverware, a centerpiece too extravagant for a simple family dinner. Marcia, glowing as ever, was halfway through describing the details of her engagement celebration. I took my seat, noting how Reet had placed me opposite the window, where the glare of the setting sun caught my eyes just right. A small thing, but nothing in this house was ever truly small. You didn't mention you were planning the engagement party, I said, keeping my tone casual. Marcia smiled but didn't meet my gaze. Oh, it all came together so fast. You've been so busy, we didn't want to bother you. Not invite, not include, not inform, just didn't want to bother. The chicken was dry. The wine was Reet's usual favorite, too sweet, but poured with flair. Conversation moved from party planning to dress fittings to floral arrangements. I was quiet, letting them forget I was still at the table. Until Reet set down her fork and said casually, You know, Kara, since you're doing so well these days, maybe you could take care of the catering deposit for the shower. I didn't flinch. But inside, something twisted. A beat of silence passed. I'm sorry? I asked, voice even. Reet smiled like it was obvious. Just the deposit. Marcia's under so much pressure. She's juggling a lot. You've got that stable nursing salary. It just makes sense. I looked around. No one seemed surprised by the suggestion. Not even Dad, who chewed slower but didn't speak. You're asking me to pay for part of her wedding? Well, Reet said, waving her hand as if dismissing the tension. Not the wedding, just the shower. It's family. My hands were steady. My voice calm. Have you talked to Marcia about her budget? That made her pause. Marcia looked down at her plate. Kara, Reet sighed. You don't have the same kind of stress she does. You don't have rent. You're not planning a wedding. You've always been so dependable. Dependable. The word echoed in my chest like a punch. I thought about the months I'd lived off ramen to pay off my student loans. The 3 Christmases I skipped gifts to cover extra mortgage payments when Dad was between jobs. The secret I'd kept when I found out they used my account to clear Marcia's tuition. I just want to be clear, I said, setting my fork down carefully. I'm not financing this wedding, or any piece of it. The room shifted. The air thickened. Reet's lips thinned. Her back straightened. You should be proud to support your sister, she said, voice cooler now. We all rise when she does. There it was, the guilt card, polished, ready. Proud, I repeated slowly. It's about family. It's about showing up. And disappearing while I do it, I replied, looking right at her. Being proud to be invisible? To be used like a donor who doesn't get named on the plaque? Marcia looked like she wanted to vanish. Dad had finally stopped chewing. Marcia's success, Reet said, voice tightening, is a reflection of all of us. No, I said. It's a reflection of her image and my account. Silence. It stretched long and hard and loud. Marcia whispered, Mom. But Reet held up her hand. We don't need a lecture tonight. It's a family meal. You started it, I replied, standing now. Calm, not angry, just done. You asked for money, assumed I'd give it, wrapped it in support and pride, and didn't expect me to say no. Reet stood too. You've changed. Not really, I said. I just stopped nodding. I stepped back from the table. The clatter of my chair against the wood wasn't loud, but it rang like a bell. I'm not storming out. I'm just leaving the table. If you want a sponsor, call the bank. If you want a daughter, start acting like you have 2. I turned toward the hallway. No one followed. The Charleston air hit my skin like truth. I stood outside a moment longer, watching the windows of the house where I'd grown up, realizing I didn't recognize a single thing inside anymore. Back home, I kicked off my shoes and walked straight to my desk, opened the folder on my drive, the one labeled Family Fraud. I clicked Rename, New Title, The Truth Archive. I sat back in the chair, arms folded, eyes on the screen. They won't see this coming, I whispered to no one, but they'll remember it forever. Monday mornings usually started with coffee, a second snooze, and a deep breath before diving into another long week at the hospital. But this one was different. I didn't press snooze. I didn't brew coffee. I went straight to my laptop, opened my bank dashboard, and clicked Settings. The auto transfer line blinked at me. $1,800, set to recur on the 15th of every month. Destination, the mortgage account listed under my parents' names, but the source, my account, mine, always had been. I hovered for a second, not out of hesitation, but acknowledgement. This was the last time they'd take from me without asking. Cancel. Confirm. The confirmation popped up. Transfer disabled. No funds will be sent on the next cycle. I sat back, folded my arms, and let the silence soak in. Not guilt, not fear, just stillness. I remembered something I'd heard in a podcast once. You don't owe loyalty to anyone who thrives off your silence. I used to think it was harsh. Now it felt like gospel. I whispered, done. The emails could wait. The laundry could wait. But that moment, that was mine. The first dollar they didn't touch. The first step toward reclaiming what I hadn't even realized I was giving away. That evening, after a 10-hour shift, I got home to my phone buzzing. 3 missed calls, all from Reet. Then the voicemail dropped. Kara, the bank just called. The mortgage is unpaid. What are you doing? This is not the time to play games. Your sister is under so much pressure right now. She doesn't need this stress. I played it twice, not because I didn't hear it the first time, but because the entitlement in her voice was so layered, it needed an encore. Not a single word of concern, no curiosity, no effort to understand, just panic. I didn't respond. I went about my night, dinner, shower, laundry. My silence was no longer submission, it was strategy. The next morning, a text from Marcia lit up my phone. Hey! Mom's freaking out. Can you just transfer it for now? I'll pay you back later, promise. No emoji, no hey sis, just the familiar tone of expectation disguised as urgency. I stared at it, then closed the message. A few hours later, another voicemail from Reet. This one softer, more manipulative. You've always been the strong one. You don't turn your back on family, not like this. Your sister needs you. Ah, there it was, guilt wrapped in nostalgia. I didn't delete the voicemail. I forwarded it to my secure folder. If I ever needed to explain my silence, I'd have her words to do it for me. After work, I opened the Truth Archive. I added new subfolders, audio recordings, emotional manipulation, financial timeline. I spent hours organizing, not because I needed to, but because it gave me peace. I was documenting a system, one that was never meant to be spoken aloud. As I dragged and dropped files, I thought about how often respect in our family was code for, don't challenge me. They weren't panicking because they were confused. They were panicking because their ATM had gone silent. I remembered Reet's favorite saying when I was younger, silence keeps the peace. Maybe. But sometimes silence keeps the predators fed. Not anymore. In my journal, I scribbled with a kind of calm precision. They only scream when they feel you slipping away. I'm not slipping, I'm running. Then I put the pen down, leaned back, and exhaled. My chest felt lighter, my spine straighter. I wasn't trying to change them anymore. I was removing myself from their script. That night, I opened my social media profile. Not for a dramatic post, not to name names, just a whisper. I edited my bio to say, family obligation. I hit save. It wasn't loud, but it was visible. Within minutes, old classmates, co-workers, people I hadn't spoken to in years started reacting. A few messaged, "Are you okay?" That hit me hard. Thinking of you. I didn't reply to any of them, but I saw that Marcia viewed it, and that was enough. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine, not to numb anything, but to toast the moment. Finally, my boundaries had more volume than their demands. I didn't check my phone again until past midnight. One new email. Payment request denied. Mortgage account rejected. I smiled, just slightly, then whispered, "You built your life on my backbone. Let's see how strong it really is without me." Tuesday morning started with 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails, a text thread from Marcia, none of which I opened. I didn't have to. I knew the tone. I could practically hear the panic laced beneath every, "Can we talk?" and "Just let me explain." I didn't answer. Silence wasn't my surrender anymore. It was my lens, sharp, revealing, intentional. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. While the kettle hissed behind me, my phone vibrated again. Ping! This time, it wasn't them. It was an old classmate from high school, Danielle. We hadn't talked since graduation. Her message read, "Hey Kara, this popped up on my feed. Is this your sister?" Attached was a YouTube link. Title, "From Struggles to Success, My Story, Marsha Monroe." Of course, I clicked play. The screen opened on Marsha, seated in a minimalistic living room, soft piano music in the background, fake bookshelf behind her like she was broadcasting from a leadership podcast. Her tone was humble, her expression practiced. I didn't come from wealth. I built from grit. I used to skip meals in college. I budgeted, learned to say no to things, and slowly climbed back from student debt without asking for help. I paused. Without asking for help. I clicked ahead. Marsha was now walking through a montage of her supposed rise, events, seminars, photos of her speaking into microphones, standing confidently in designer outfits I recognized, not because I'd seen them on her, but because I remembered seeing the charges hit my card. Her voice continued over the visuals. Every step I took alone. And that's what I want to teach other women. You can reinvent your life without debt, without handouts, without leaning on anyone. Then came the kicker. Video clips of our family kitchen, the granite I'd paid for, the new fridge I bought after theirs broke down, all paraded as part of her before and after glow-up. I opened my banking app, pulled up the date for the remodel payment, matched. I paused the video. "You really thought the camera would protect you from the truth," I whispered. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sent flowers, white lilies, simple, classic, no sender name, just a card tucked inside that read, "To growth, whichever way it comes." Marsha knew it was from me. There was no way she wouldn't. It was our mother's favorite flower, and I was the only one who ever sent them anymore. Hours later, I got the notification. Marsha had posted on Instagram, photo of the bouquet. Caption, "Thank you for always knowing what I need." Tag, @Sabrina Howard PR. Sabrina, her best friend, her PR manager. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Not angry, not shocked, just done. The rewrite wasn't surprising. It was expected. She'd always been good at twisting gestures into stories that fit her narrative. It wasn't the lie that bothered me most. It was the ease, the speed, the casual betrayal. I screenshotted the post, saved it to my folder, added a new tag, rewritten gifts. Back at my desk, I opened a new document, labeled it, Public Claims versus Private Payments. I started with the kitchen. Video timestamp, 6:32. My remodeled space, paid with years of hard budgeting. Reality, payment of $4,912.82 on my credit card, cleared in March 2021. Then her outfits. Timestamp, 4:15. Learning to dress for success on a dime. Reality, Lux Guilt transaction, $2,245, May 2022. Same dress. I kept going. A list, a ledger, side-by-side truth. Not revenge, documentation. On my corkboard, I pinned a yellow post-it over the list. They're building their image on borrowed reality. Let's give the truth a voice. I scrolled back to the YouTube page, watched the likes climb, comments praising her strength, her independence, her message. I clicked report, selected misinformation. Not because I thought YouTube would take it down, but because I wanted a trail. Then I opened a new blank document. Title, Statement for When They Force My Hand. And I began to write. The envelope arrived 4 days after I posted the timeline. Thick paper, gold seal, formal script across the front. An evening to rebuild. Inside, the note read, Kara, let's clear the air. One dinner. No drama. Just healing. Mom. It felt more like bait than invitation. I stared at it a moment, then slipped it into my bag without responding. I already knew I'd go. Not for peace, not for her, but because there are some moments in life when silence isn't strength, it's armor, waiting for the right time to strike. That Friday, I wore navy, sleek, professional, not mourning, but not celebrating either. I walked into the venue alone. A private room in one of Charleston's historic restaurants had been rented just for the occasion. Polished wood floors, white linen tablecloths, wine already poured. The kind of place where confrontation didn't match the wallpaper. Reet smiled too quickly when she saw me. Marcia stood beside her, makeup precise, smile polished. I walked to the table, folder under my arm, and took my seat without greeting either of them. Toast began 5 minutes in. We're here tonight, Reet announced, raising her glass, to honor someone who's always supported this family without complaint. A rock, a provider, a loyal presence. I blinked once, then twice. For years, she gave without asking anything in return. And now it's time we give her the recognition she deserves. The room, small, curated, nodded along. Extended family, a few family friends, the same orbit of enablers who believed every staged social post. Then she turned. To my daughter, Kara. A few light claps, some surprised smiles. But before I could say a word, the spotlight shifted. And of course, Reet continued, none of this would be possible without Marcia. Her drive, her vision, her perseverance through struggle and sacrifice. This family stands taller because she rose higher. People clapped again, louder now. I caught a glance between Marcia and a woman I didn't recognize, probably her new publicist. Reet's voice softened as she added, and if we're lucky, Kara's quiet strength and Marcia's bold leadership will keep this family legacy alive. I felt the blood leave my face, because the words she read next, I'd written them, years ago, in a letter, to Marcia, after she got her first job. She's the storm I could never be. She walks into rooms and changes their shape. I'm just the wall she leans on to catch her breath. Reet delivered it like a quote she'd crafted herself. The room applauded again. But I didn't move. When the noise finally died down, I stood, unzipped the folder, pulled out the first sheet. This, I said, voice calm, is the mortgage payment receipt. I've paid this house's mortgage for 23 months. Total, $64,800. I laid it on the table. This is the tuition check I covered when Marcia deferred her loan but told you all she got a scholarship. Another page. These are the Venmo transfers labeled rent and utilities but funneled directly into shopping trips and retreats. I slid out bank statements, printed screenshots of Instagram captions cross-referenced with my payment history. $47,216.13, I said, eyes locked on Reet. That's the cost of keeping the illusion alive. And it was billed to me. Marcia's face lost its grip on composure. Her jaw moved, but nothing came out. Reet opened her mouth, but I cut her off. This isn't blackmail. I don't want your money. I don't want repayment. I want acknowledgement. I turned to the room. You applauded her for being self-made. You praised her for sacrifice. But you never asked whose sacrifices were used to stage the show. Silence. Utter, suffocating silence. Reet tried again. Kara, there's no need to air this. Loyalty without respect is slavery, I said. And you've built an entire family image on mine. Marcia's whisper broke through the hush. I didn't know it was that much. You didn't care, I replied. Then I turned to the guests. I'm not here to burn the house down, I'm just cutting the power to the spotlight. I collected each page, slid them back into the folder, and clasped it shut. Then I looked at Reet. I hope the show's still worth it without me. I stepped away, heels quiet against the floor. Before I reached the exit, I turned back once more. There's one more file. With a lawyer, in case this dinner becomes history rewritten again. And I walked out. The morning after the dinner felt oddly still. No firestorm, no blow-up voicemails, just an unsettling quiet. I woke to a cluster of text messages from numbers I didn't save. None of them were from Reet, none from Marcia. Instead, I had a dozen half-hearted responses from extended family, the kind that sounded like they were typed with one eye closed. Hope you're okay. That was a lot. Maybe things will calm down. Aunt Joy sent a voice message. She had never taken sides before. You did what most of us were too afraid to, Kara. And I think deep down, even your mom knew this was coming. I listened to her message 3 times. It wasn't approval, it wasn't comfort, but it wasn't avoidance either, and that made it feel more real than anything I'd heard in years. I poured my coffee, sat at the counter, and waited for the inevitable backlash to erupt. But it never came. No one defended themselves. No one denied the facts. They didn't scream. They disappeared. That kind of silence doesn't happen unless guilt's got them by the throat. By afternoon, the next ripple came. Not from Reet, not from Marcia, but from my cousin Emily. She texted one line. Did you hear the voice memo? I froze. Then, a forwarded audio file. I hit play. Marcia's voice, mid-conversation, clearly frustrated. Honestly, Kara's always been the mule. She pays, we move. She's bitter now. So what? The background was muffled, but unmistakable. Reet's laugh, soft but genuine, as if they were in the same room, the same mood, the same smug circle of confidence. They'd sent it to the wrong group chat. Emily added, it was supposed to go to her PR team. She sent it to the family chat instead. Screenshots poured in next. Cousins, aunts, even my younger uncle, all silently forward it to me. No commentary, just proof. I listened again. She's always been the mule. The words didn't sting like they might have before. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I saved the file. I labeled it Confirmation. That laugh from Reet, so effortless, so unguarded, hit harder than Marcia's words. It told me everything I still wanted to deny. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a sibling misstep or a mother too caught up in her favorite daughter's charm. This was by design. They knew, and worse, they enjoyed it. I sat on the edge of my bed, played the voice note again, and then I opened my recording app and hit record. My voice was steady. No rehearsing. This was never about revenge. It was about release. You just gifted me the key. I saved the message under my name. For myself. Afterward, I drafted a personal statement. Not for social media, not to blow up anything. Just to put in black and white what had really happened. Not my side. The truth. I quoted Michelle Obama near the end. When they go low, we go high. But going high doesn't mean going silent. I wasn't silent anymore. But I wasn't loud either. I was done carrying their weight. There would be no more behind-the-scenes deposits, no more invisible handouts, no more being the default safety net while they posed on balconies and tagged influencers in borrowed gratitude. By evening, a message came from Lindsay, an old nursing friend. Did you see this? She attached a screenshot. Marcia's latest brand partnership had been paused for internal review. The post she'd been paid to promote disappeared from the company's page. The comments under her last hustle culture video were filled with vague but sharp questions. Wait, didn't your sister pay for that? Self-made? Receipts say otherwise. I used to believe you. Reet, the Facebook queen, hadn't posted in 2 days. No family quotes, no inspirational brunch pics, nothing. I didn't celebrate, I didn't pour wine, I didn't text anyone, told you so. I just breathed, like I hadn't in years. Then came the knock at my door. I didn't move at first, let it knock twice more. No answer. Later that night, flowers arrived. White chrysanthemums. No note. I knew what they meant. A single text followed from a relative I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Thank you for telling the truth. No one tells you how quiet validation is, how heavy relief feels. Just before bed, my phone lit up again. Restricted number. I hesitated, then answered. A pause. Then, I'm sorry. I didn't know they went that far. I want to talk, Marcia. The morning after Marcia's voice memo blew up, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt still. No fireworks, no dramatic apology, just a shift. I made breakfast, actual breakfast, not hospital vending machine trail mix, and ate it while watching the sun creep across my floor. My inbox was full, but not with rage, just quiet recalibration. 2 aunts emailed vague lines like, "Families go through things," and "Hope you're doing okay." A cousin who hadn't spoken to me in years sent a single sentence. That dinner was overdue. What I didn't get was any message from Reet. No call, no snark, no guilt-laced silence, just nothing. Marcia, still radio silent. And that somehow said more than any voicemail ever could. Later that day, I checked my savings account. For the first time in years, it hadn't dipped. No automatic withdrawals, no emergency cover this for me texts, just stillness. It felt odd, empowering, but unfamiliar. I stared at the balance and whispered, "So this is what not being used looks like." Then the mail arrived. Among the usual credit card offers and newsletters was a letter, heavy, formal, from a law firm in Colombia. The name made my chest tighten. My grandmother's attorney. I sat down, opened it carefully, and began reading. The first page confirmed what I already knew. My grandmother had written me into her will. A portion of her land in Somerville, along with a small inheritance, had been intended for me in recognition of the years of unwavering support, selflessness, and service to this family. But the second page shifted. An amendment. One that redirected the land and the funds exclusively to Marcia. It had been signed during my grandmother's final week in hospice. The signature was there, but shaky, too shaky. And the filing, sloppy, out of sequence. The kind of error a paralegal wouldn't normally make unless someone insisted. I contacted the firm directly. The paralegal I spoke with paused when I asked about the amendment. "That one came in late," she said. "Submitted by your mother. We never spoke directly to your grandmother after her hospitalization." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I stared at the wall and felt something shift inside me, something irreversible. "They took even that," I whispered. "While I was changing bedpans, they changed history." I ended the call and dialed someone else, my own lawyer. We scheduled a consult. That night, I opened Dropbox and created a new folder, Estate Manipulation. Then I walked down to the waterfront with a legal pad, sat on a bench, and started writing. Not a lawsuit, not an accusation, a reckoning. Page 1. I'm not chasing what was stolen. I'm naming it. I listed everything, from the tuition payments to the voice memo to the silent redistribution of assets. It wasn't about court. It was about clarity. I started sketching out a personal essay, how families steal from their caregivers. It didn't have to be bitter, just honest. A woman walking her dog passed by, paused, and nodded toward the water. Beautiful, isn't it? I nodded. Some things are clearer from a distance. She smiled, continued on, and I kept writing. Later that evening, I met Lindsay for coffee. She slid her phone across the table. You've seen this? It was Marcia's main brand partner, an eco-lifestyle label, releasing a statement. We are aware of concerns raised by recent events and have paused all collaborations pending review. I blinked once. Her PR firm's restructuring, Lindsay added. Code for cutting her loose. I didn't gloat, I didn't clap, I didn't even sigh. But my shoulders eased. Another friend messaged, I unfollowed her. You deserved better. Small things. Still things. But after years of being drowned out, those whispers felt like thunder. That night, I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote a single line. They wanted the spotlight. Now they're burning under it. The next morning, just after breakfast, a courier rang my doorbell. I opened it and was handed an envelope, handwritten, no postage, hand-delivered. The paper was thick, the ink dark. My name written with care Reet hadn't used in years. Inside, 2 folded pages. The first line read, You may think you understand, but you don't know everything. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for nearly an hour before I touched it. Heavy paper, thick strokes of ink on the front. My name, centered. No return address, just the familiar rhythm of my mother's cursive. I poured tea, folded laundry, did everything except open it. When I finally did, I used the edge of my nail to slit the flap. Inside were 2 folded sheets, cream-colored, faintly perfumed. I unfolded the first, sat down, and began reading. You think you understand everything, it began, but you never saw what we had to deal with. Not dear Kara, not even hi. She went on to recount old debts from my father's failed investments, the foreclosure they narrowly avoided, and Marcia's fragile state during high school. How protecting Marcia meant sometimes pulling support from me, not because I was lesser, but because I could handle more. You always seemed stronger, she wrote. I thought you could carry it. There it was. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel tears building. What I felt was a steady ache, like pressing on an old bruise, familiar, dull, and deeply known. She never once said, I'm sorry. Never once said, thank you. Just justification. I laid the pages on the table. They looked like something written by a stranger who knew my handwriting but none of my memories. They never thought I needed protecting because I never asked. I murmured to no one. I left the letter there and walked out onto the small balcony, wrapped in a cardigan, feeling the breeze off the harbor. My eyes scanned the horizon, not for clarity, but to let the noise settle. The silence felt earned. Later that night, I opened my journal and began to write. She said I was strong, but she used my strength like a bridge she never meant to pay for. Another line. She didn't want me to shine, she just didn't want me to break. I flipped back to the letter. Still no apology, no acknowledgement, just reasoning and deflection. Maya Angelou's words returned to me. When people show you who they are, believe them. I folded the letter again and slid it into a file marked for closure, not contact. I didn't reply. I didn't plan to. Closure didn't need a second voice. The next morning, I took a long walk through downtown Charleston. I passed the bakery where Marcia once staged a photo shoot for her Entrepreneur of the Week post. The bookstore I loved as a teen, where I used to sit and read quietly while Mom bragged to strangers about Marcia's latest college paper. Now, I wasn't avoiding memories. I was rewriting them. I stopped at the corner near Calhoun Street, and a voice behind me said, Kara? It was Ben, an old classmate from high school. He looked older, grayer around the edges, but familiar in a way that settled me. You look different, he said. Good, like you're finally living for yourself. I smiled. I finally stopped paying for approval. He laughed. That's a sermon right there. We talked a while, then said goodbye without exchanging numbers. Some moments are meant to stay whole. That afternoon, I applied for 3 travel nursing contracts: Denver, San Diego, and Asheville. I didn't know which I'd take, but I knew this: home wasn't always where you were raised. Sometimes it's where you let go. Later, back at my apartment, I stood by the window thinking, do I forgive them? I whispered my answer into the room. Maybe, but I don't return what I forgave. I didn't need a response. I didn't need closure from anyone else. I was my own witness now. I opened Dropbox, highlighted every file in the Truth Archive, and moved it into a single folder. Complete. Then I created a new blog. Title: The Invisible Anchor. I didn't promote it. I didn't share the link. The first post was simple. They called me strong because they needed me quiet. I'm still strong. I'm just not silent anymore. I read it once, took a breath, and hit publish. 2 days later, a message came in. It was from a name I barely recognized, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. I read your blog. I thought I was alone. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment, and then I smiled. Maybe my story wasn't just about pain. Maybe it was the beginning of someone else's freedom. The invitation arrived the following week, slipped under my apartment door in an envelope too thick to be innocent. Cream stock, gold embossing, my name in Reet's carefully looped script. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Inside, the card read, Kara, let's talk like family. No blame, just healing. Brunch. Sunday at 10. Please come. No blame. From people who'd never taken any. I placed it on the counter, made coffee, and reread the line 3 times. It didn't enrage me. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. They weren't sorry. They were losing control. I decided I would go, not to negotiate, not to comfort, not to bend. I'd go to deliver what I should have long ago, a final statement. That afternoon, I prepared my own envelope, slim, unassuming. Tucked inside was a notarized severance agreement I'd drafted with my lawyer. At the top, it read, Termination of financial ties. At the bottom, my signature. Sunday came with spring sunlight and empty streets. I arrived at the restaurant early, my boots tapping quietly against the floor of the small private room they had reserved. The table was laid out with cloth napkins, bone china, and overcompensation. It was always about presentation with Reet. She'd dress up decay if it made her look like the matriarch of grace. She greeted me with a smile that tried too hard. Marcia was already seated, sunglasses on the table, face pale behind expertly applied makeup. Kara, Reet said, hands lightly open. Thank you for coming. I sat without responding. The waiter came. Coffee was poured. Reet launched into her script. This family has been through a rough time, but I truly believe we can find peace. Move forward, together. Marcia nodded, lips tight. I let them speak. Then I opened my bag and placed the envelope in the center of the table. This, I said calmly, is a notarized severance agreement. It details every cent I've contributed to this family over the last 5 years and officially ends all financial ties, past and future. The words flattened the room. Marcia's eyes widened. You're really doing this? You already did, I said, locking eyes with her. I'm just finishing what you started. I read aloud the total from the document. $62,347.17. I pulled out a pen, drew a clean line down the signature page, and tore it in 2. Half I left on the table. The other went back in my bag. There's no more IOU, I said. You can't owe me if I'm not your source anymore. Reet opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. No more speeches. You've spent years performing love. I'm giving it back. She blinked, lips trembling. Marcia looked down, for once, with nothing to say. I turned to her next. You could have said thank you. Once. You knew. All of it. You used my name like it was an unlimited credit line and never looked back. Marcia looked up slowly. I didn't realize it had added up to that much. You didn't care to. I stood. No anger, no venom, just certainty. I've spent my life funding your spotlight. From here on out, I fund only one future. Mine. Reet reached out toward me. Kara, please. I stepped back, calmly. You didn't lose me because I stopped loving. You lost me because you never started. And then I walked away. No slamming doors. No dramatic exits. Just the quiet sound of heels leaving a room they'd once carried. 3 weeks later, I boarded a plane to Portland. The travel nursing contract was short, 12 weeks, but it was enough. Enough time to breathe, to work, to hike without checking my phone for a deposit request or guilt-laced emoji. I visited lighthouses, ate alone, slept better than I had in years. I journaled every morning and took photos of fog curling over the ocean like smoke from a candle just blown out. One evening, I published a blog post. Title, What You Gain When You Let Go. And I wrote about the invisible burden of being the reliable one, the unthanked backbone, the ghost of family functions. I wrote not to shame, not to accuse, but to name what had happened and how I'd survived it. Within a week, the post went viral, mostly among women, nurses, teachers, single moms, adult daughters who had held their families together with duct tape and quiet compliance. One line was quoted the most. Family is not who you serve. Family is who serves love back. Emails poured in. Messages from strangers who wrote, I thought I was the only one. They weren't. I wasn't. We never are. Then one afternoon, while I sat in a coffee shop near the Willamette River, an email popped up. Subject line, Marcia, I read your post. I'm not okay. I stared at it. No rage, no gloating, just awareness. I clicked the archive button and smiled, not out of relief, but out of freedom.